Yeah, welcome to this podcast. I have with me Ritika Khurana. She did her bachelor's in economics from Delhi College of Arts and Commerce, and then she went on to do her master's in agricultural economics from Gokul Institute of Politics and Economics, where she was my junior. And then she was associated with the CGIAR centers, including CIMIT, Biodiversity and International Food Policy Research Institute in Delhi. After that, she went on to get her Ph.D. in Natural Resource Economics from West Virginia University. And after finishing her PhD, she has been working as a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Delaware. And she's joining us from the city of Portland, Oregon. Yeah, welcome to this podcast, Ritika.
Thank you, Manhar. Thank you for inviting me to your podcast. I feel
Yeah,
really
yeah.
honored.
Very glad that you are joining us for this podcast. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, Ritika. Um, your PhD dissertation that you did at West Virginia University was
Yeah,
titled as
carbon emissions abatement, natural disasters,
yeah,
politics, and social institutions.
and the subject of discussion of the today is a paper which is linked to your PhD dissertation, right? Which is titled
Yes.
Climate Change, Natural Disasters, and Institutional Integrity.
Yeah.
So,
It was
Ritika,
my job. Sorry.
yes.
I was saying it was my job market paper. So yeah. So I would love to discuss that with you today.
Yeah. So, given the title of your paper, is Climate Change, Natural Disasters, and Institutional Integrity. So, can you explain
Yeah.
the title, in a very brief manner?
Um. So. This paper, when I started, it was about climate change, and the reason why I chose this title was because it was really interesting for me to study the nexus between climate change, natural disasters, and institutional integrity. There were many papers where they had already studied the impact of economic growth on climate change, or impact of economic growth on institutions. So this in this paper, I got a chance to study how the three impacted each other.
Okay. And, so given that climate change is now going to be a very important topic because of, the rise in greenhouse gas emissions, right?
Yeah.
And it is going to have, implications, for, the economic growth across the world, right? So how did
Yeah.
you, in your paper, measure climate change, Ritika?
In this paper, as we all know, that climate change is usually measured over a long period, that is at least 30 years of period. And in this paper, I chose to use the two main important factors which are associated with climate change, that is, change in temperature and precipitation. So, how that impacts natural disasters. So, because the natural disasters that are affected by change in
Mhm,
temperature and precipitation
mhm,
are storms,
mhm,
droughts, floods, extreme temperatures, and wildfires. There were other natural disasters such as earthquake or landslides. Those
mhm,
are not directly impacted by change in temperature and precipitation, but these five that I just named, storm,
mhm.
drought, floods, extreme temperature, are directly impacted by natural disasters. So that's why it made sense to include these five and exclude uh, earthquake or any other kind of epidemics, which are also considered as disasters.
Okay, so you are saying in your paper, when you use the term natural disasters is linked to these five events: storms, floods, droughts, extreme rising temperature and wildfires, correct?
Yeah, that's right.
And so that sort of, so these events, impact the institutions of, the countries, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
because we're measuring institutional integrity at country level, national level.
Yeah, so institutional integrity as such is actually a very broad term. Okay.
Yes.
Now,
Yes.
I would like you to, explain what do you mean by institutions. And before, I ask you to explain what is institutional integrity. Yeah, what are institutions? Yeah. And why are they important for economic growth?
Okay. So as we know, if we have good quality institution in a country, it nurtures the growth of the economy, or it spurs the growth of the economy, because these institutions make policies that are in best interest of the public. So by institution here I mean legal, social, political, and financial institutions. If these main five institutional settings are really strong, stable, and sound in the country,
Uh-huh.
then the policies made would be in interest of the entire most of the population of the country. That's why it's important to study institutions with respect to economic growth, because that is what is helping the economy to grow. Economy is run by these institutions,
Okay,
in
so
presence of these institutions.
yeah, so there are these four institutions, right? Social, legal,
So it's like all the institutions, but here these are broad categories. Social institutions, which has, if you look into it, there are other categories, or if you dive into it, there are deeper meaning of social institutions. For
within
example,
social, there are a number of subsets of, social.
yeah, there are number of subcomponents, subsets, and then obviously there are economic system, socio-economic systems, then financial, legal, all these are broad terms that I am using right now. But in a few minutes, I'll explain what exactly are the subcomponents of these.
Yeah, so given this, what is institutional integrity, and how do you measure institutional integrity, Ritika?
So institutional integrity is it's a very simple term: quality of institutions. The how strong your institutions are, or how much are they responsible for the country's growth. So if they are, like I said, if they're sound and stable, the economy will grow in a different way than in countries where institutions are not stable. Basically, it's the stability or quality of institutions that I'm measuring in this paper.
Yeah, so democracy is also, considered as institution, right? Having a
Yeah,
strong,
democracy is also part of institution, because that is the form of the government in the country. Because across in the world, we have different kinds of different structures of the government, right? So democracy is one of them. Then there's authoritarianism. Then there is uh, you
China.
have military in politics, where on the surface there is democracy, but actually the military of the country is running the country. So
Yes, yes. So China
yeah,
is a clear case of authoritarian regime, right?
yeah, China is one of them.
Myanmar, which is a clear case
Yeah,
of.
a lot of these, they have Myanmar, Russia, where they are ruled by one single party, one single ruler, or elite class. Or like most of the Middle Eastern countries are mostly run by these royal families. So those royal families have, they're all connected. So either one family is running the country, or probably one ruler. So there are uh, different kinds of structures of of government.
Yes, so there is a lot of empirical evidence, which is out there, which links whether democracy, helps in spurring the economic growth of a country, right?
Yes. So there are studies that talk about that democracies are linked with higher income, growth or higher per capita GDP, but there are also countries where there's a balance of the two and they still have achieved higher income. And I think Singapore is one of them,
Yeah,
where there's
Singapore.
a balance
Yes. China
of the
is
two.
also a case of where the
China is a case of authoritarian regime,
yeah, yeah, but they have
one party rule.
yeah, but they managed to achieve high income status, right? Right.
Yeah, I was reading a paper where they, that talked about how, what are the factors. I think it was something on LinkedIn that you shared,
Yeah,
where it was, how, the reasons why China grew much faster than India. Some of the policies that were good for them back
yeah,
then
they
aren't didn't have a really fruitful result now when the era is such that they need more population where their population is dying and aging.
yeah,
So some of their policies backfired.
yeah. That said, that article was like China is going to grow old before it becomes, rich. And by rich, I mean
Yes,
in terms of Western standards. So China
yes,
still
yes,
has
yes.
a long way to go before it,
Yeah,
touches that level. Yeah, and the other was that China's growth has been built on infrastructure, manufacturing,
yeah.
right?
And a
Yeah,
lot of investments, a lot of
and
FDI
yeah,
from the Western world.
yeah. So their growth has been driven by investment in physical capital, not human
Yes,
capital, right? Yes.
yes.
Yeah, so that's digression. Anyhow, so Ritika, yeah, coming back, to this paper. So, given that you've explained, given like a very brief, analysis of your paper. So, what was the motivation for the problem? I mean, for picking up this problem, and if you can explain the theoretical construct of
Yep.
the linkages between climate change, natural disasters, and institution integrity, right?
Yep. So as we know that over last few decades, there's been increasing, there's been changing climate and increasing occurrences of natural disasters that has really given the world a huge challenge and has created a lot of havoc, in terms of melting of glaciers or warming of earth or rising sea levels. All of this has actually led to upheaval of the political and economic system because a lot of the GDP is going in fixing all of this or finding solutions to all these bigger problems. And
Mhm.
and we also know that there's a strong link between climate change and increased frequency of natural disasters. Like I said, they are mostly driven by change in temperature and precipitation patterns. And the main motivation was that in, I think, 2015, there was a 2015 Paris Agreement, if I'm not wrong. So after that, all the countries, were set on the path to reduce their climate emissions, and to reduce their climate emissions, they really needed to strengthen the quality of the institutions, because if the quality of institutions are strong enough, then they will be able to implement policies, execute policies that can
Mhm.
actually have an impact for various industries that are behind all the pollution, that are behind all the greenhouse emission. So because of all the ramifications, it's really important to study how the three impact each other, how climate change impacts natural disaster, or how people are affected by natural disasters, and how that impacts the quality of institution, because it's not one way street. It's between how the government reacts to climate change or natural disaster, and how people react to these situations. So it's a really intricate relationship. And in
Yeah,
this paper, we study this empirically, meaning using the data set from different sources. We study the effect of climate-induced natural disasters on quality of institution of 92 countries.
and yeah, so yeah, but then you measure institutions using a different components, right? I think there are 12 indicators you use in your paper, right?
Yeah, so like I said, institutional integrity, the way I have measured, is a really big animal. It has 12 different components, and these components together are called. It's a matrix that I form, and together it is called institutional integrity.
Okay. So can you point out some of the indicators, Ritika?
Yeah, some of the really important ones that that can be understood by anyone is democracy, government accountability, and corruption in the system. Are there any internal and external conflicts in the country? Because a lot of times there are so many internal conflicts going on
Yes.
because of different ethnic, because of different
Yes.
ethnicities in the country, or different
Yes.
religions in the country. So all of this impacts a lot, and sometimes there are the central and the state systems are not in line with each other, which creates disruption within the country and all. And external conflicts such as war among neighboring nations, that is also one reason of lower integrity of um, institutions. For
Yeah.
example, India and China don't have the best of relationship. So
Yes.
that would actually reduce the points in this metrics for India and China both, because as neighbors they don't have the best of relationship.
Yes. The other thing is that Azerbaijan and Armenia, right? That also is one example.
Yes, Azerbaijan and Armenia.
Yes.
And there are so many other countries like India, Bangladesh, India, Pakistan. So coming from India, so I know there are so many other, I can talk about so many examples where all these different conflicts among countries would reduce their score on the institutional integrity metrics.
Yeah. So that will reduce core and external conflict, which is like one of the 12 components, you use, right?
Yeah, one of the 12 components. I just
That-
focused on one
Yeah.
of the 12.
So there is this, so the other is government stability, right? Which has
Yeah.
three
Yeah.
components within it.
Even Okay, if I have to talk, the 12, I'll actually reiterate the 12 components for you.
Yeah.
Government stability, which actually is about the government's ability to carry out different declared programs in the country, and its government unity. Then there are socio-economic conditions of the country, which includes unemployment levels or poverty levels and all of that. Then investment profile, which
Uh,
includes FDI or payments to different countries, or the loans that they have taken from each other. Then internal conflicts, external conflicts, corruption in the system.
mhm.
Then there is military in politics. Some of these countries have military participation in politics, where military people are the ones making budgets and making
Yeah,
uh,
Pakistan is a clear example of it.
yes. And then we have religious tensions in the country, that if the country doesn't have homogeneous religion and there are fragmentations in terms of religion, then there are tensions based on that. If the all the religions aren't living in harmony, then law and order, how unbiased law and order is in the country. Ethnic tensions, which is related to different racial, language, and nationality composition within the country, because like
Okay.
India having being such a large country with almost more than 29 languages, if I'm
Yes.
not more than 29 languages in the country. So how different they are,
Yes.
and are there any tensions based on language or racial component. Then democratic accountability, which talks about whether the country is complete democracy or leaning towards one party state, or authoritarian regime, or is there a balance between democracy and authoritarianism. And last
Yes.
is bureaucracy quality, the strength of administration of the country.
Yes. To absorb, like the way you define is strength of administration to absorb shocks on
Shocks
account
on the
of
account of
changing
change in
government
government or major policy shifts.
policy shifts. Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes the government of the, like in India, there were cases where the government, a general tenure of the government is 4 years. So did the government stay for its regular tenure, or did it fall much before it was due for elections?
Okay. So, given all these, indicators, uh,
Yeah,
how is India doing, if I can ask you that? Though I is not objective of your paper, but I'm asking this out
yeah.
of your curiosity is how is it?
So these when I scored them together, they made up 100 points because they were not, though there were 12 components, they were not equally they weren't equally scored. So some
Mhm.
had higher scores, some had lower scores, and together they made up 100 points. So
Mhm.
India was somewhere between 48 to 58, which is like, if I had to give a percentage, if assuming 100 is the highest marks, so India scored between 48 to 58,
Okay. So
which is
that's
about maximum about 55% uh strength
okay. So we
on
still
this paper.
have a lot to do in terms of
Yes,
improving our
yeah,
institution, right?
yes.
If we can interpret your findings in that way. Okay.
Yeah.
But we're not doing too bad also, right?
I wouldn't say that this was anything lower than 70 was it was considered as low quality institutions.
Oh, okay, okay, okay. Okay, but yeah. Okay, so
Obviously, there were countries that are really bad. Now we're not comparing that. We're not there to stoop that low, right? We
okay.
are here to improve our institutions, so that our policies are implemented better, so that we have better execution at different levels in the country.
Okay. But let's say if I were to ask you whether we have improved on the institutional front recently, like over a period of last, 10 years, because our
Um,
growth has also been, improving, a lot, and it is scheduled to be the third largest economy. I mean, we will be doubling our nominal GDP within the next 7, 8 years.
so there were so if you're talking, so first of all, if I have to answer this based on my paper, the paper was had data until 2016. So
Yeah.
anything after that,
Oh,
it's
okay.
hard,
Oh, okay,
difficult
okay.
for me to
Okay, okay,
comment.
okay.
And I think that's like almost 7 years
Yeah,
or 6 years.
exactly.
It's
Exactly.
been,
So it's hard to
yeah,
interpret,
yes,
or
anything
hard
after that,
to
because they've not done.
extrapolate, your findings into
Yeah, and
this.
after that, the world was hit by COVID. So,
Yeah.
that was like a really big Trump effect for all the
Mm.
countries, where countries reacted or respond differently. As in, the institution that were really good didn't um, respond in a way that they were expected to. So it's
Yes.
hard for me to comment on that.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's a different, a separate discussion altogether. Anyway,
Yes.
we will not go in that direction. So coming back to your paper,
Yeah.
Ritika, now that we have talked somewhat more than briefly about your paper. So now
Yeah.
coming to the data and the methodology. So if you could throw some light there in terms of your data sets. You mentioned the indicators, but where did you get your data from? I know Freedom House, they give data for democratic values, right? Freedom
Yeah.
House. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a couple of data houses that provide data for institution integrity or institution quality of institution. But I chose this ICGR, which is International Country Risk Guide data set provided by PRS Group, and this
Yeah.
provides data on so these are political risk ratings that I converted into institutional integrity, and these were 12 of them, which I named just now. And so together they score every component from 0 to 12, and some of them are scored from 0 to, and bureaucracy quality is scored maximum up to 4. Together, they, any country is scored out of 100. So if you get 100, or if you're close to 100, that means your quality of institutions, they're really great. But if you are on the lower end, which means your institutions are doing fairly poorly.
Okay.
And then I've also used natural disaster data set, which is from emergency database of uh, the Center for Research on Epidemiology of Disasters. This is a really famous data set for natural disasters,
Okay.
and they include this data set based on if any country, based on this criteria, that if a country is hit by a disaster where 10 or more people are killed by the disaster, or
Mm-hmm.
100 or more people were injured, homeless, or affected, or
Uh-huh.
was there an emergency declared by the state, or
Okay.
lastly, whether international assistance was sought by the country. So if any of the four criteria happen, so that
Hmm.
natural disaster is included in that data set, because it talks about the size of the natural disasters,
Okay.
which
So
means they were of that great magnitude. That's why it was recorded.
okay. So can you get into the methodology now,
Yeah,
Ritika?
so in this paper, I use instrumental variable approach, which is famously known as IV approach. And for this, I use a Hosman-Taylor methodology. So this Hosman-Taylor methodology is basically a cross between fixed effect and random effect. It's, just to explain you in a very simple term,
Yeah.
where Hosman-Taylor methodology retains the consistency of fixed effects while utilizing the efficiency of random effects.
Okay.
Because uh, and the estimator that we get in this is efficient as well as consistent, which is what we want when we are considering blue assumptions for regression.
Okay. Okay. It was obviously a panel data set, right?
Yeah, it's a panel data set
Uh,
for the 92 countries, uh, starting from year 1984 to 2016.
okay.
Though the data set that I got was much bigger, but after cleaning the data set, it reduced down to 92 countries.
92 countries. Okay. So your conclusions, whatever that you derive,
So
were
yeah,
based on so were an aggregate level conclusion, right, for these 92 countries, right?
yeah. So from this paper, we found out that as the natural disasters in a country increase, the quality of institution in that country deteriorate, and this aggregate level impact. But when we saw the impact on individual components of institutional integrity,
Mm-hmm.
we found that the ones that were by majorly impacted by natural disaster was government stability.
Mm-hmm.
Then internal conflicts were increased soon after a natural disaster was hit in a country. Then also ethnic fragmentation increased in a country, which means that there were fights among the different ethnicities after a natural disaster. And also democratic accountability went down, which means natural disasters led to an inclination towards authoritarian regime,
Okay.
because countries wanted to have a control over the population soon after a natural disaster,
Okay.
to be able to retain their power.
Okay. So institutions are important because if they are strong, then the policymakers can use the institutions to implement policies which will help bring down the emission of greenhouse gas, right?
Yeah, because then the
There's a
policies that will be
loophole.
implemented yeah, will be in the best interest of the environment and best interest of the country for economic growth.
But there will be some short-term consequences of that also, right?
Definitely, there are short-term consequences, but then the problem here we are dealing with is climate change, which is a global problem,
Yeah, yes, yes. And
right?
they're not,
So,
yeah,
and at that level, you need cooperation from all the countries. It cannot happen that India is suddenly taking measures that are reducing climate change, that would reduce climate change in
yes,
years to come. China, on the other hand, is still on the path of is
yes,
on the path of emissions, right? But if
yeah,
such a thing is happening, or let's take example of US, if it's still on the path of reduce, emitting a lot of greenhouse gases through
yes, yes,
different, it's
yes,
difficult to achieve the Paris Agreement targets, or it is difficult to achieve any target set by all these countries in all these big meetings.
yes. You need coordination and cooperation of each and every individual, because if
Yes,
one, is unable to hold up to, their targets or, promises, it has consequences for
yes,
each and every one of us. Okay.
yeah.
Given that, I think it was just a couple of days back, that uh, India discovered, I think, 5 million tons of lithium.
Lithium in Jammu Kashmir.
Yeah, Jammu and Kashmir. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that has become a really big news here too.
yeah, exactly. So that will help in in achieving the desired objective of bringing down carbon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yes.
yes. Yeah. Any other point, Ritika, in regard to your paper that you would like to point out that we
I
might
would
have missed?
say that so one of the policy recommendation that that came out of the paper was importance of strengthening individual factors, because when individual factors are strengthened, it'll be easier for governments to prepare, for natural disasters and or for adaptation efforts, because we also need adaptation efforts at this point. So individual factors are really important for institutions to strengthen, and that will further have an impact on the aftermaths of natural disaster, because this is what we're discussing here is aftermath of natural disaster, right? The number of people that are affected by natural disasters. If they are
Yes.
prepared for a natural disaster, or if they have the right adaptation methods in place,
Mhm.
the impact can be reduced.
Okay. Okay. Any implications for India, that your paper has? No.
We didn't do any for any particular country,
Country
but
level
I can,
analysis. Okay.
yeah, we didn't do country level analysis. So it's
Oh,
difficult for me to just say that'll be out of just thin air.
yeah, yeah, but it's a very important, question, because climate change, has consequences for the aggregate macroeconomy also, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
definitely.
yes. Yeah. So yeah, Ritika, thank you, so much for, talking about your, paper. Okay. And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you, Ritika. Yeah.
Thanks for inviting me. Thank you, Manar.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Ritika. Thank you.